Let us begin by reading the word problem out loud. The previous record for the deepest underwater dive is 237 meters below sea level. A few years later, that record was shattered to 264 meters below sea level. How many meters below sea level was the previous record lengthened by? Let us continue our strategy for problem solving by analyzing the problem. Keep in mind that the first thing you want to identify when analyzing the problem is the question that's being asked. So in this case, the question is, how many meters below sea level was the previous record lengthened by? So now that we know what it is we're asked to find, we're going to go ahead and assign a variable. So we're going to let our unknown variable be represented by the letter x, and it's going to be equal to the number of meters below sea level that the previous record was lengthened by. Again, it's simply the question reworded in the form of a statement. So now let us go ahead and continue analyzing the problem. So let's see what other information we can extract. So we know that the previous record for the deepest underwater dive was 237 meters below sea level. A keyword here is the number 237, definitely, but also below sea level. So it's going to be an indicator of negative 237. And then also, what else do we know? Well, we know that a few years later, that record was shattered to 264 meters below sea level. So we have something there. And then again, below sea level is an indicator of negative 264. So that's all we can really do for analyzing the problem. So let's go ahead and start forming an equation. Now before actually forming the equation, I'm going to go ahead and draw a picture. So I'll draw some waves to indicate sea level. And now what we have is one diver. So here's one diver. So this is the first scenario. And then we have a second scenario where again it's the second diver. And now he's just deeper. So the first diver gets all the way down to 237 meters below sea level. The second diver gets all the way down to negative 264 meters below sea level. So the question is, how much further deep did we get? X. So you want to know that distance. So we're going to go ahead and create our equation, and it's going to be the following. So what we have here is that the new record is negative 264. And that's going to be equal to whatever the previous record was, which is negative 237. And now since it went even further down or deeper into the sea level, we're going to have to subtract from that the value that we're looking for, which is x. So again, we have negative 237, that was the previous record, and then we went further down into the sea, so a deeper sea level, so we're going to have to subtract that quantity. And then that's going to give us the new record. So now let's go ahead and solve our equation. We'll go ahead and start off by bringing the original equation down. So now what we want to do is we want to get the variable x completely by itself. Right now, notice that we have a negative 237 in front of it. So you're going to want to undo this negative value. So you're going to want to add it to both sides. That's the only way to undo negativity. So let's go ahead and do so. So there we go. So then on the right hand side of the equation, we're going to be left with the negative x. So go ahead and bring that down. And then also the negative 237 and the positive 237 simplify out. So we're good there. Now on the left hand side, we're going to want to simplify these out. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and do the subtraction rule. So we're going to take the absolute value of both numbers and then subtract the smaller from the bigger. We'll go ahead and do that off to the side. So we can do the absolute value of negative 264, which is going to be a positive 264. And we're going to do the absolute value of 237, which is equal to 237. And now the bigger of these two is definitely 264. So we're going to subtract 237 from 264. So we'll go ahead and carry out the subtraction. We'll start off by doing the 4 minus the 7. Since 4 is smaller than 7, we have to borrow from the 6 next door, which is going to become a 5. And turning our 4 into a 14. So now 14 minus 7 gives us 7. 5 minus 3 gives us 2. And then 2 minus 2 gives us 0. So we end up with the value of 27. But now keep in mind that the 264 was negative. So then the negative number is going to definitely win. So that's going to give us a negative 27. So now what we want to do is get the x value completely by itself. So right now there's a negative sign in front of it, or ideally we're multiplying the x by a negative 1. We want to undo this multiplication, and the only way to do so is by division, which is the opposite operation. Now since we want to undo a negative 1, we're going to want to divide both sides by a negative 1. So on the right hand side, a negative 1 divided by negative 1 gives us a positive 1. So we're left with 1x, which is the same thing as just x. And on the left hand side, a negative 27 divided by a negative 1 gives us a positive 27. So there we go. We have solved for x. Now let us go ahead and state our conclusion clearly. So the question was, how many meters below sea level was the previous record lengthened by? So we'll go ahead and say our conclusion to answer that question, and we'll have that the previous record was lengthened by 27 meters below sea level. So now let us go ahead and check the result. When checking the result, you want to start off with the original equation found in step 3. So we'll have negative 264 is equal to negative 237 minus x. But we now know the value of x, so we're going to go ahead and substitute that in. And then since the value of x is 27, we'll have negative 237 minus a 27. So all we have to do is simplify this on the right hand side. So on the left hand side, we'll just bring down the negative 264. And now on the right hand side, since we have a negative 237 minus a 27, they are both the same sign. So ideally, we can rewrite that as the following. Negative 237 plus a negative 27. So now they're the same sign, so we just simply have to add them on up. So we'll go ahead and do that off to the side. That's scratch work. So then 7 plus 7, it gives us a 4. We bring down the 4, carry the 1. 1 plus 3 plus 4 gives us a 6. So we bring down the 6, and then we bring down the 2. So we end up with 264. But since both values are negative, we're going to end up with a negative 264. So then we're going to go ahead and write that down. So we end up with negative 264 is equal to negative 264. So that verifies that our solutions are correct since we have a true statement.